Hello and welcome to Japan Expert Insights and our Wednesday morning room with Tim Sullivan and me, Maya Matsuoka, as your hosts and moderators. In this podcast, we welcome comments, questions, and opinions. So if you haven't done so yet, join us next time on Clubhouse. In the meantime, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and Japan's role in the Indo-Pacific region.
So, Maya and I had been talking about this topic for a while. And, I've had kind of one foot in each culture for since the late 1980s. And I saw a lot of conflict, but also I saw admiration from both sides, for the other side, for certain aspects, of the other side. And I used to hear a lot of complaints from each side about the other side in terms of what their perception of what a good leader is. And in kind of getting ready for this room today, Maya made a really good point, define leader and leadership, right? And I went down a rabbit hole because I never really thought about trying to define it. I've seen all the definitions that people are peddling, on LinkedIn about what a great leader is. But when I look at certain leaders that, let's say, have a cult following, I don't think that person is a good leader at all. But the people who follow that guy, they think he is. And they think my leaders are not very good. And so even amongst my own compatriots, whether it's political or running a company or whatever the role is, we don't even, I think, agree on what is a good leader. So with those kind of thoughts, anyone else want to chime in terms of leadership? Because I'm looking at what are the universals and what are some of the things that are specific to a culture? That's kind of my interest. And of course, how to bridge the gap. So that's kind of as an intro, just my thought.
Yes, thank you for that, Tim, and good morning to everybody who joined us on stage. Yuka, Ren, thank you for coming, and good morning to everybody who is in the audience. We hope that you find this discussion insightful. Of course, if you have observations or opinions, or if you think that you have questions too, please join us on stage. You can raise up your hand and we will bring you up here. Everybody is welcome to join. We maintain a civil discussion always. And of course, today we're going to talk about leadership across cultures. So there are universal features and there are also features that are specific to culture, to the culture, where the leadership is exercised. So hopefully we're going to find some of these universal and specific features today, but of course we're not going to be able to cover everything. So please do feel free to join us at any time. So today we've got Tim Sullivan and we've got Yuka Marushek and we've got Ren Egawa here. And now I'm inviting Sargis on stage. Hopefully you can join us. So welcome. Thank you for this, and let's start. Welcome, yes, and let's start. Tim, thank you for the introduction. We can continue. Please, Yuka and Sargis as well. You don't have to wait for me to say, please go on, whatever. This is a free talk. Let's start.
Before we go on, can I ask a clarification from Timothy? When did you say that, did you use the word cult leader? I wasn't sure.
I was using it as an extreme example to make a point.
Oh, okay.
Any cult leader. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a cult leader. What I'm saying is whether it's the political arena or the business arena, different people have different preferences about what kind of leader they like, including myself. I have certain preferences, right? And I think there are cultural tendencies that might be a little bit, that are different. But I also think, for me, there are certain There are certain common points where I've had worked for great Japanese leaders, and I've worked for great American leaders, and they had some things in common. But then again, that's from my point of view. And one was integrity, a sincere desire to help me succeed, and it made me want to help that person succeed. And we communicated really well. So I'm just trying to throw out some examples of, and then some of the differences was some of my really great Japanese bosses weren't they weren't great at giving speeches, and they didn't really talk a lot. But when they said stuff, it was very spot on and at the right timing. But they mostly, again, this is my perspective. These are Japanese bosses that were great. They did things through action, like they demonstrated. And I've had American bosses like that too.
Actually, I get more confused. So we're talking about leaders, not managers, right?
We're talking about leaders.
So the
leaders.
leaders as like even at the top of the organization. Is that right?
Or the ideal leader. What is an ideal leader in
Okay.
Japanese culture? And again, even in Japanese culture, I think people have different opinions about what a great leader is. And it might be regional, it might be age-wise, it might be industry. But I'm interested from a Japanese view, maybe for a starter, like, to you, who's the ideal leader? How would you describe the ideal leader from your point of view?
It's so interesting because I was just talking about this with other people, and then I'm gonna throw a curveball because typically leader, you think that leader has to sort of manage, and then like you're saying, manage the company or manage the people underneath him or her through his action. But somebody told me the leaders have to grow the company first. And then everything, and then I'm sorry, that's why I just said, I'm going to throw a curveball because, you're more talking about more sort of like a psychological aspect, right? But now I'm sort of saying, don't the company have to grow first to leaders to become a good leader?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, and I'm not. I can't disagree with you. I guess what I'm saying is, I'm looking at leader in starting with a general definition and then working down because, as you implied, I think it's contextual. If you're running a company, if you're the leader of a company, then growing that company is important. But even then, there might be questions like, is this guy good at quick turnarounds but is bad at sustainable growth? Or is this person, more steady and does things over the long haul? So even then, different people might have a different kind of, depending on the context, what leadership role you take. But yes, I agree. That would be one of the measurements of a leader, a guy or a lady running a business.
Well, I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I think that we need to start probably a little bit from the base, saying that a leader is somebody who people willingly follow and respect, and then work from there up and see, what the difference between a manager and a leader is, and then what are the features that work universally and what are the features that are specific to different cultures. And of course, I did some research earlier, and I found that there are some principles of leadership. So, like, a lot of gurus, have agreed on them. Like, leaders should lead by example, and leadership is about people, or leaders should focus on change. Of course, they have to be human and admit their mistakes when they make mistakes, of course, or also understand the value of listening. And this also ties up to to what Tim, you said it earlier, be sincerely willing to help their people, let's say their subordinates, to succeed. And of course, also work together with the team to achieve results. So, but there are, of course, other things. And I can see that some of these principles actually have different angles in Japan and in the United States, I believe, and also in other parts of the world, because I come from Europe anyway. And even though both Europe and the United States are in the Western Hemisphere, we still have different business cultures there as well. So that's why I think that we need to start probably from the most universal, let's say, things. As I mentioned in the beginning, a leader is somebody who people follow willingly and respect. So, and I wonder whether you agree on this. And then what does respect mean? And how you show respect to those leaders.
Yeah, I think that's a great basic place to start. And I like it because the followers are saying this is a good leader. It's from the followers' actual results received, whether they are willing to follow that person. So yeah, I think that's great. So I'm really interested in getting other people's perspectives.
Yeah, I would like to. I know on the floor, on the stage, I look like I'm the fourth person to be able to speak. But I would like to yield the floor to my friend Sargis, because I was the one who suggested that he be invited to the stage. So I would like to allow Sargis to speak first, have him introduce himself, and then share his view on what leadership means. Because as you can see, Sargis has a very impressive career resume, if you will. So I'd like to pass the microphone to Sargis if you're able to talk now, Sargis.
Thank you, Ren, and thank you, Sargis, for coming on stage.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. Much appreciate Maya for giving the opportunity. Um, leadership is defined by differently depending on what organizational structures you might be in and what countries. Certain places, individual focus might be more important than other countries where collective, push is much more required, and you have to have leaders or individuals who understand that. The best leaders out there are the people who understand the human character and are able to understand how, whether it be a bureaucracy or organizational structure works. For me, I've served 20 years in the U.S. military. I served 6 years through that process. What I did in combat was completely different than what I did, in non-combat environments. What I do with the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement as a CEO is completely different than what I do with my 501c3, which is a humanitarian organization. I tell my folks one thing that they need to be aware of, that everybody out there is from the neck up. What you see and hear, which drives what you're thinking about. And the second you talk about it and act upon it, it defines you to everybody as to who you are. And from a perspective of what we did in the military, we never looked at a general officer and said, this is a great general officer. We looked at the tree and the branches that came right after him or her. And those individuals that were able to rise up in the footsteps of those leaders really define who they were. So from a perspective, a country will define the leader by how successful a country is. An organization can do that also. And whether or not there's a legacy where after that individual is gone, there's still organizational structures or a legacy that continues. Now, leaders who understand the human character, some can be absolutely awful people. They could be dictators, they could be, as you were saying, cult leaders. But if they can tap into the human character, understand it, and talk to it, and are able to create legacy organizations which follow them long after they have passed, then we tend to look at them and say, we may not like them because of what they did, but they're still leaders, and they still have followers, individuals who their messaging resonates with them. And I think the ones who do the good deed, like we say in the United States for us, are the forefathers who built this nation, gave us the institution and capability that has allowed us to still remain an ideal, a nation with an ideal that is able to have effects throughout the entire planet, over multiple generations and nations that have come and gone and will come in the future. So you cannot really define it. There's a science to it, but there's an art, and the ones who are able to really understand their organizational structures, the people that they're working in, do know when they have to speak, and when they don't, and do know when they have to inject, and when they don't. And hopefully they have a vision to where they would like to see others, aspire to or be able to build them to get to. And that's usually in legacies that they leave behind. And that's pretty much it. I don't think I've said anything that nobody else has said out there. I may have said it differently, but I think all of us, we may not be able to define leadership, but we know it when we see it. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
That's a great definition, though. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
glad it wasn't just me who was struggling to define it. And by the way, thank you so much for your service. Much appreciated. I'm a veteran too, Navy. So I really do appreciate it. And I think the interesting thing about Sargis is you have served these leadership roles, as you said, in completely different environments, right? Combat, now, the professional sector that you're in now. Do you, and I think you described very well, like, the understanding of the organization, how to make things work, right? But in the end, It's whether you get stuff done, with the resources that you have. I mean, I'm trying to simplify it, but in the end, that's kind of the litmus test, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to score a goal every now and then. If you just dribble the ball around the soccer field, you're not going to be beloved as much. That's why I think accomplishing a goal where everybody understands it um, is important. So there has to be certain measures by which they can at least say, okay, this is a good leader.
I have a question though, Sargis, if I may. The military example is a great one. And then, we use the word leaders and followers. And, the leaders not necessarily means, someone with high ranks, right? I mean, let's say, someone is at, that Tim might be higher than me, and then I will follow to a certain degree. But if I want to follow him, that's an example, Timothy. If I want to really follow him, I really should be able to, I have to respect my leaders. So my question actually, I think, is how can you, can someone make followers follow him or her? I'm not saying it right. Again, nothing to do with ranks or your titles. Right? I want to follow someone regardless of his or her titles or ranks.
Yeah, you can't force anybody to follow you. A 2-year-old doesn't follow you. You have to set the conditions by which followers understand what you're trying to do, and some of them may not understand it early. Now, you cannot be a good leader if you're not a good follower. You have to be a good follower to be a good leader, and the reason for that is because a follower has to be able to listen to what the boss is saying and be able to execute what the boss says directly to do, or execute what he believes is the intent of the boss. And if he doesn't understand intent, then he goes back and talks to the boss, says, hey, I just want to make sure that this is your intent, that I didn't misunderstand what you were saying. And if the boss is gracious enough, as time, they'll explain it to him, but maybe more in a different way. But you cannot be a good leader if you're not a good follower, because that means you're not a person who can not just listen to the words that are being said to you, but digesting those words and understanding what is being conveyed both culturally, emotionally, historically. In order to be able to do your best to address what the leader wants, and then be able to turn around and give good advice. I mean, I've had leaders ask me to do things that I've done, and they were absolutely shocked and surprised at the geostrategic level as an individual, doing my operations based on what they had just basically asked me to do. And then I've had the same leaders ask me to do something that they thought was simple. And I said I can't do it, and they were surprised. And they said, "How's that possible? How can you work at a geostrategic level, but you can't just move this thing from here to here?" I said, "Because I told you, this thing moving from here to here, there's a bureaucratic process to it, and I cannot affect that bureaucratic process to move it. It has to be somebody else." So I had a young man recently, as of just, let's say, actually it was last year. Everything's moving so fast these days. Came to my house from University of Chicago and said, "Hey, what do I need to do? I would like to have you be my mentor." I said, "Well, I'm available anytime you have any questions." But I said, "I'm not a guy still, with everything that I've done, that I see myself as being able to mentor you at a level that you're looking for." And with that said, I told him, if you want to be a good leader, you have to know everything about everything, across the gamut. In my culture, the Assyrian culture, Assyrian Christians, not Syrians, but Assyrian Christian culture, the word for general is Rab Khela, means the one who holds the power. And we don't call them generals because general means somebody who's basically has general concept of how everything operates in an organizational structure of the army. We call them the people who hold the strength, basically, to hold the power, and you have to know when to use it and when not to use it. Some of that stuff comes from experience. Some of it comes from understanding where you have to be engaged. Some of it comes from a gut reaction. You're never going to be able to see or validate if you were right or wrong for taking the step you did. As I have always said to folks, no decision is a right or wrong decision. It's just a decision. But it has consequences. And a good leader is somebody who has taught through a process to see what the consequence may be before they act on it. And if they're able to have gone through that gambit in their own mindset, and sometimes they might not be able to answer all the questions, and they take a step, even if it is not the plan that they thought was going to come to fruition, even if there's failure, they're able to have a fallback and a recovery, not for their own protection, but for the protection of the people around them and the organization. And if they're able to do that, those are the individuals that I would invest money in, because those are the individuals who are going to be able to grow the next number of leaders that I would like to see in my country. Everybody will do what they want. Everybody has their own path to travel. But a leader says, as long as you're under my care, I will make sure I do the best I can for you to learn as much as you can before you decide I may want to go somewhere else. So there's a human aspect of it there that I think if it resonates, then people would like you to be a mentor for them. I hope that answered that question.
Yes, thank you. And then, I'm sorry, before I forget, if we have a time toward the end of the room, I'd love to hear what your organization does, but it's a different topic from today's topic, so I'm going to hold off the question, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sargis. I was I was pleasantly surprised to see you coming to the room, and I hope it was okay that I asked Maya to invite you to the stage. And as always, you have so many insights that I think we all can learn from. So thank you for that. And about the leadership, there are many books, many techniques, but to me, there's really only one thing in my mind, that is, how do I say? If you can make the people around you feel the importance, feel the cause that you feel about, the same way you feel about. In other words, they are not doing this because you are a good leader. They are not doing this because they love Maya or love Timothy. They are doing this because somehow you influence them to a point that they take your issue as their issue. When you reach that level, I think you are pretty successful as a leader. And I'm trying to think who could be a good example of this. Maybe Martin Luther King. I mean, those people who are marching with him in the national malls, in the Capitol Hills. I don't think they are marching because they love Martin Luther King. I'm sure they love Martin Luther King, but because they took the issue as their own issue. And that is the leadership that I think Martin Luther King has demonstrated to us. Now, I understand this may be oversimplifying things, but at the end of the day, I'm not there yet. I still have to tell my guys, you need to do this, you need to do that. But hopefully someday I reach that level that I don't have to say anything. My guys understand what I need, what I care about, and they will take issues as if this is their own issue. But I'm not there yet. But I hope I can be there someday. And then to me, that is ultimate leadership position that a person cannot achieve. So that's my view. I don't know if this is helpful to everyone.
I think that's a beautiful description. Persuasiveness, getting them to care about what you care about, and again, it's based on the reaction of the people who follow it. So
yeah.
Thank you.
And the danger of that is, some really skillful people, they will use religion to make you feel that you need to believe in God, in the God that they believe in. This is a double-edged sword, right? Because this is so powerful. So I hope this kind of leadership is only on the positive side, not on the evil side. Because we have so many bad examples in the past. I'm sure those Germans, the Nazis people, they were really thinking that this is the right thing for their country. They must do this. So you can say Adolf Hitler had a very good leadership, even though
yes,
that was that's the point. I think we need to be careful about it. But I think still that is a leadership way of demonstrating what a strong leadership is. Okay.
Thank
Well,
you, Ray.
if I can jump in here real quick, Ren, you mentioned it. Actually, I had a friend of mine who was running for office in this year's election here in the United States, and he said, "Can you put something together for my son as far as what his platform should be?" I said, "No, his platform should be his. It's not my job to write a platform for him." I said, "If he puts it together, gives it to me, I could look at it and say whether or not it flows or not, because I kind of understand the electorate here, or the people who vote in this district." But he said, I think it would be wonderful because, we want positive moral leadership to guide him. And I said, look, leadership is leadership, regardless if it's positive moral or not. That's a choice you make. I make the choice to be a positive moral leader. But I ran insurgencies in the military. And if I want to run an insurgency and be a bad person, I could do it. I could flip in a heartbeat and do that. I choose not to. And his issue was that, his son being from a Jewish background, sometimes wants to counter what some of the stuff we have in the U.S. Some people have a perspective that you have a communist element that operates in the United States, and they have pretty good stronghold understanding how to, train the next generation of leaders that they need to promote their agenda. And what I did for him, I said, here's what I'll do. I'll write something simple for you, and you tell me what you think about it. So I wrote it. I gave it to him. He looked at it. He thought it was wonderful. His dad thought it was the greatest thing that was ever written. And I said, do you know where I got most of those ideas? He said, no, tell me. I said, I got them from the book Mein Kampf that Hitler had written. And of course, in their family, they had a lot of people that were killed during the Holocaust. He said, I would have never guessed. I said, look, it's a matter of understanding that good and bad leaders can use the same techniques. It's just whether or not they want to choose to be good or they want to choose to be bad. If they want to choose to support the overall goal of an organization, like you were talking about, Ren, because Japanese look at things and leadership as more of a holistic group support and strength. Where an American company, if you could be a good leader if you teach people how to compete and beat the other guy, who might be in the same organizational structure. So it's a kind of a different approach from country to country because culturally you approach things differently. But at the end of the day, I always say to people, if you're a good moral leader at heart, regardless of the technique you use, you'll probably be able to have more of an enduring plan that after you're gone, and as we say in the military, you become fairy dust, people will be able to take down range with them for the next 100 years, creating institutions that are positive. If you're the other guy, you always can create the same type of a structured institution. However, it will always be an institution that causes conflict with all societies, because at the end of the day, it's basically based on an individual caring more about himself and his small entity than caring about the overall effects on everybody that they come in contact with.
So yeah, continuity, is really important. It's kind of funny. The segue, I looked up this quote because it's a Drucker quote, and he said, he's talking about the role of charisma, and I thought it was kind of interesting after what both Sargis and Ren just said. But according to Drucker, he said, what matters is not charisma. What matters is whether the leader leads in the right direction or misleads. The constructive achievements of the 20th century were the work of completely uncharismatic people. Two military men who guided the Allies to victory were Dwight Eisenhower and George Marshall. Both were highly disciplined, highly competent, and deadly dull. Anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting quote. Charisma is overrated when it comes to leadership, although some people attribute that. But in the end, it kind of echoes what I think Sargis and Ren both said. Are you going in the right direction and choosing to do good?
Yes, there is something else which I thought about when you were reading that, Tim. So, and it's probably a different way to look at it. And I was thinking about the difference between quiet and noisy leadership. And probably it's also cultural, because we know that in different cultures, being assertive or being humble they are actually valued. And of course, we know that in Japan, basically, it is very important to be humble. So you cannot be noisy and expect people to respect you here and to trust you, when you just, talk about yourself all the time and so on and so on, and when you are assertive. So I think that you have talked about this before, how the Japanese leaders, they lead by example, and they don't talk that much, right? So they do their thing, and there is where the magic happens.
Right, Maya, if I'll have to be careful not to turn this into some kind of political room, but I think since we're talking about Japan, I think it is maybe it is not inappropriate to talk about this gentleman called Shinzo Abe. to many people in Japan have different opinions about him, but from outside, from someone like Sargis or from Atami or Tim Sullivan, who is also from Chicago originally, and someone like you, Maya, from Bulgaria, and you guys from California, Illinois. How do you well, first of all, do you see him as a leader, and how is his leadership different from the leadership that we see in other countries? And I think this may be worthy of discussion without going into the politics, of course, because he's such a visible person. And if we want to talk about Japanese leadership, maybe he's a good person to talk about whatever he did that made sense as a good leadership.
I wish Timothy Langley were here right now.
Yes.
Or maybe we can ask Sargis. Sargis, I'm not sure if you have followed Shinzo Abe, but from outside, how would you give his leadership some credit for what he has done and the way he has done that you think should be more appreciated outside of Japan, if I may ask that?
Well, if anything, I mean, and the pure example of it is when he was assassinated, and the funeral was supposed to be a close funeral for just family members and a close number of individuals from the political spheres. The people of Japan said, "We understand that, but we're showing up," and they showed up in the hundreds of thousands and paid their respect. Um, and for Japan to show that kind of an outward love for a leader is important. Like for me, I have been asked earlier this year uh, to give my opinion to the Japanese Diet, which is their equivalent of their parliament and Congress, as to a message of what I think should be where Japan should be looking in the future. And I think Abe was a visionary who understood what's happening and the current world and what may happen in the future. That's why he was a very key individual as far as getting everybody behind, really concerning about the possibility of removing Article 9 from Japan. I mean, you could see what's happening today, even after his passing. Just today, Europe is starting to ration oil, and no guarantee that they could do that. The Russians limited their oil to a 20% support, which means that you're going to have a lot of problems within NATO itself. You've already had major nations come out and are starting to question whether or not they should have. They never had, were, as they say, we were never consulted on whether or not there should have been a war in Europe and Ukraine. So Abe had seen that, and given the fact that Japan today is looking for basic lumber to be able to sustain it as an island nation in the future, and over the winter, and looking at possible ways of being able to get fuel and food to feed its people if the so-called conflict that's happening across the globe becomes worse, especially with this global possible famine that is hitting various different regions, to include Africa, where I just came from. I think Abe and that desire had seen a difficult peace that be moved inside of Japan and took steps to unify as many of the Japanese political groups that were from differing viewpoints to at least come together and consider a possible change to that article. Now, what's going to happen in the future, nobody knows, because Abe is no longer with us. But just being able to at least have an impact even after your death, for people to have that discussion on your behalf, is very important. And if I may bring a biblical piece to this, and I don't want to take too much time, but I think it's important for me just to talk on this issue. You have two characters in the Bible that we first read about. One is Abel, the other one is Cain. Cain was an older brother of Abel, who, from the Christian perspective, God had said, "This is where you give me your offerings." And he was happy with Abel's because he was following the rules and the regulations, you might say, and was following what God had told him. And Cain wanted to go a different direction. It guy came to a point where he was so unhappy that he picked up a rock and smashed Cain in the head, or Abel in the head, and killed him. Now, the first question that man ever proposed in the Christian Bible to God was, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And it goes to the whole leadership question, right, that we're discussing today. Now, Cain went on, got married, had kids, and had ancestors. Abel died. But to this day, Abel, who never even uttered a word in his entire life, never said anything spoken in the Bible, still to this day, he speaks to a lot of people from the Christian faith that you need to be more like him. and we still debate what he did in leadership without doing anything, through his action, dying, becoming the first martyr, as Christians would say, to where what Cain did. And most of our world is that way. Most of the world has leaders who either just do it through actions like Abe did, or others who try to counter against what a guy maybe like Abe was doing, which usually doesn't lead into positives. That's why I think you brought the Martin Luther King ideal up. Again, I don't want to talk too much. I apologize for that. I know I went a little bit on a rant on this, but I think I wanted to kind of tie everything together, and I hope that answers the question that was asked by Ren.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charges. And I think I should yield the floor to all my friends about their thoughts about what you just said. Tim, Maya, Yuka, or you guys on the phone?
I have a policy. I don't talk about politics publicly, whether it's Japanese or American. And so I will say this, just an observation, as a interculturalist, if you will. I've noticed that the view of Abe from outside of Japan is much different than the view of Japanese people I talk to every day or read about. And good, bad, indifferent. I mean, as Ren mentioned, there's a variety of opinions. But Abe seems to have almost greater stature in the international community than in Japan. But that's, maybe I'm misreading it, but that's kind of what it looks like to me.
Yeah, thank you for those perspectives. And yes, Abe, he remains a controversial figure in Japanese politics. And Tim, as you said, a lot of people within Japan still have reservations, and this is a very soft way of putting it, towards his policies. Of course, at the same time, there are those who admired him even within Japan. And the fact that he remained in power, he remained prime minister for a little over 8 years, I believe, speaks to his leadership skills, I believe. So, but we're not here to talk about politics anyway. Thank you very much for making these points and exemplifying them. So I would like to go back to talking about business and leadership in business. So yes, once again, going back to the quiet and let's say, leadership style or leading by example, I think that when I compare leaders here in Japan and leaders in Europe, because I cannot speak about the United States, I can say that back home, people are so much more extrovert when it comes to promoting themselves and, trying to actually tell the others that they are great leaders than it is in Japan. And I have seen a lot of people here through my 21 years in the country who actually do not speak that much. Tim, as you mentioned in the beginning of this room, they are probably not good at making speeches or delivering presentations. But at the same time, when it comes to actually getting people to work together, unifying them and setting the goals and making those goals clear, then it really becomes, their skills come to the fore and everybody can feel that. But I wonder, because Tim, you have had also experience, you have worked with both Japanese and American leaders. So, and Ren, you also work in the United States. So I wonder whether there are any other differences you can see between these, let's say, managerial styles.
Yeah, they can be quite different, obviously. I think one of the bosses I had in an American company, well, actually, it's a European company with headquarters in the U.S. I think his style is more direct and more. He's not shy, and he. I don't know. I don't know how to say this, but there are so many different people with different backgrounds or heritage in the U.S. In this particular boss I had, I think he's a German American, and I don't know if this is a typical German American. If I say it's a typical German American, then I think I may be labeled as a racist. So I have to be careful. But I think it's suffice to say that it will be difficult to say this is the American way of leadership, because maybe the American way of leadership is. The best way to describe it is there are so many different styles. That is the American way of leadership. You can have an Indian American, you can have a Taiwanese American, you can have, one of the most I have was Italian American. And I don't know. I think the heritage does play a major role. But again, I don't want to make this as some kind of stereotype things. But I think you can also. I think you'll be also foolish to ignore the heritage part of the multiracial ethnic country that makes America. So it is a balancing things. I think we need to be respecting, not because we want to be adding stereotype. So for example, this German American boss I had, he just doesn't give doesn't sugarcoat things. He would tell it like the way it is. We are behind the schedule. The customer is upset. Basically, very, very straightforward. I think I appreciated that, and I don't think I've met any Japanese managers that are as direct as he is. And also, when we had an issue with the client, which was a major Japanese corporation, the Japanese client was expecting him to start by saying, "I am sorry," but he does not. He starts by telling the customer that two things really. One, we agreed that there's a problem. Thank you for finding the issue in our software. So acknowledgement. And the second thing he did was trying to show the customer the recovery plan, how we are going to fix this. And then in the meantime, you can do X, Y, Z. So you can tell, as you can see, that his answer is substantial. It was something actually that can help the customer. So even though his recovery plan is good and he is on top of everything, the customer was impressed, but the customer still wants to hear he said, "I am sorry." The customer wants apology, and they keep on. And the Japanese clients, as you know, they are not really good at communicating what they want. But I could tell that they are looking for apology statement from him, even though he laid out all this great recovery plan. So at the end, he was kind of frustrated. He was not sure because the customer didn't give him a go or no go sign with the recovery plan. So he was also a little bit frustrated, and then says, "So do you want me to fix this problem or not?" Right. So that's where I see the cultural conflict happens. Both sides are trying to do the right things, but because of the cultural backgrounds differences, a good a good purposed person in the U.S. will be turned off by the Japanese client attitude, even though the Japanese client appreciate his plan, but all they want is apology. And then I think that has been my life many years, trying to help my company do these kind of cultural differences. I'm sure a lot of you experience the same things. No, this is American leadership style crashing with the Japanese culture.
Man, I've been grinning ear to ear listening to you, Ren, because the whole apology thing. I actually wrote an article years ago. Japanese customer service means always having to say you're sorry, and I did a follow-up article. American customer service means never saying you're sorry. And
right.
When there's a mistake, I had a problem with my insurance. They made the mistake, the underwriters. But anyway, it was causing me all these problems. And finally, my agent comes back and goes, he didn't say he was sorry, even though it was his fault. He says, "Tim, I have good news. We found what your problem was," and it was like he had good news for me, but he didn't have an apology. And some people say, "Oh yeah, you don't want to get sued," and in some situations, I think that's a valid excuse in America. But in some situations, I don't think it's a valid excuse. It's just, to me, it's a low cost, instant way to disarm your customer so you can move on to the substance. That's how I look at it. But I've been influenced by Japan.
Yeah, but Timothy, the other side of the coin is also true. You have some of the Japanese suppliers who knows how to apologize, but not providing the actual useful recovery plan.
Well, I think you're in a different. I'm in my manufacturing bubble, and we worked for our customers were world-class Japanese manufacturing companies, and if we sent them a defect, all hell broke loose. We had to thoroughly get data, define our problem, show our hypothesis, show our plan for improvement, monitor the plan. If we didn't get it, pretty soon the customer's engineers would be in our plant next to us, helping us solve the problem. So that's the world I came from. So maybe it's more unique to the Japanese manufacturing world, possibly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm getting confused here. Sorry. So you guys are saying that, okay, so you're talking about difference between U.S. and Japanese way of apologizing when some issues are discovered. But are you saying like a leaders, it is a leader's job to apologize when something bad happened on their side?
No, sorry, allow me to clarify, or to clarify. I think if you want to see whether this person has a leadership or not, is to see when he's having a bad time, not when he's having a good time. So when a crisis happens, when the schedule is behind or whatever happens, this is when you can really see whether this person has a leadership or not. And so we are talking about that situation. And when that situation happens, the Japanese culture, I think, tends to start by saying, I am sorry. And sometimes I see, I am sorry, but without idea behind it to really come up with a better idea for the recovery plan. And in the American leadership way, I think they're really focusing on. They sometimes forget about apology, to be honest, but they are really focusing on how can I help my customer to get through this. So they have all these innovative ideas coming up, and that's just something I love the American way of doing it. They really try to, something that is substantial, not just a verbal apology to make you feel better. And the best way is both, right? But American tends to be more right to the point, and then the Japanese tends to be more focused on verbal comforting. That's how. Maybe that's not always the case, but that's what I have observed in the past. And so that's what we're talking about, the leadership. How you appear how do you show your leadership when the things are not going well?
Okay, thank you for clarifying, because maybe thank you for this room, actually, because I just realized that I was just going back my career, and who are the good leaders in my world, and I cannot think of anybody. So I know I worked for many bosses, but I couldn't find the good leaders amongst them. And then realized, Sergis, you talked about earlier, good leaders have to be good followers. And I was asking myself, maybe I wasn't a good follower. That's why I couldn't find who the good leaders. So that gives me, the sort of some it gave me a pause to think. Thank you.
No, if I may, I mean, famous in history is the Russo-Japanese War. All started because of a misunderstanding and a cultural issue that took place between the meeting of the Russian Tsar and the Emperor of Japan. So I mean, things happen like this, but this is where I tend to see some of these things and say I don't blame the leader in that case for maybe misunderstanding something. It's something that has to be done where, as I gave that one young man advice, I said, you need to know everything about everything. You just prepare to understand how certain meetings have to go, whether it be meeting with Japanese or others. I'll give you a quick example. I was in Iraq, the Marines, and you'll get a enjoyment out of it. In the Navy, we're having problems trying to get a contractor to do the work for them. And of course, it came to me. They said, you're a cultural expert with your team. Can you tell us what's going on? I said, the guy just wants to get assurance that he's going to get paid. It's the same common thing that happens in any culture. And they're like, well, why? We tell him that, about how he's going to get paid, that the paperwork is going to be set up like this, that by regulation we have to do this. I said, he doesn't want to hear that. He just wants to hear it from you person to person, eyeball to eyeball. So they asked me to go down there if I could. And I went there, sat there, listened to the guy complain. And he complained for almost an hour. And then all I did was I said, I understand. And when he said, can I get an insurance? I slapped the back of my neck. And then he said, how can I trust? Because, sometimes they don't follow through with their promises. And then I grabbed my mustache because I had to have a mustache for the work I was doing. And then I remember when I came back, the Marines had complained to their commander that Singiri didn't want to be there. He sat there, said absolutely nothing. And the work's not going to get ahead. I said, no, he's going to start. When the commander called me into his office, I said, the guy's going to start on Monday. You just go at the time he's supposed to start and he'll be working. And they showed up and I realized the guy started work. And they said, how's that possible? You didn't say anything in the meeting. I said a lot. I told him it's on my neck, which I basically touched the back of my neck, which means that anything happens, I'm the one who's going to pay for it. And then when he talked about, that personal touch, I grabbed my mustache and I said, by my honor, basically. Without saying it, that's what that implied. The Marines didn't know that. I don't blame them for not knowing it, even though they complained to their commanders that I try to sabotage their meeting. But it was just that I understood how to communicate with that person culturally. And I told them that's why you have me here, right? I'm a cultural expert. So leaders even need sometimes to have those individuals to explain those things to them. And when those individuals are there and their leader is able to utilize the talent around them, then you might see much better movement at the operational and tactical levels. And like I said, the Russo-Japanese War started because of a misunderstanding on cultural issue between the two.
And with that, we are at 9:01. Maya.
Oh yes, thank you, Sergis, and
Thanks,
yes,
Sergis.
it is.
And everybody.
It's 1 minute past 9 o'clock when we usually close the room because it is working day here. It's Wednesday morning in Japan, so everybody's getting ready for work. Thank you very much for coming, Sergis, Yuka, Ren. Thank you very much for your contribution today and the insights too. So definitely we're going to continue this topic in the future.
Yes.
And so we're looking forward to talking with you again. Thank you very much for sticking with us. And before I take too long to close the room, let me wish you have a great day. Have a good night in the United States. And well, let's meet again. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you for tuning in today. We will be on air next week on Wednesday at 8 a.m. Japan time again, so join us. Until then, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel. If you want to stay informed about our upcoming events, follow us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn or Twitter. Again, we are looking forward to your joining us next week. Until then, stay well and make the best of the day. See you!